So Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's right-hand guy, was just busted for fraud after pulling his grift on the American people. Is Donald next? Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. I mean, when you consider that the guy at the top of the ticket, Donald Trump, has been impeached, criminally indicted by the U.S. House of Representatives. Rick Gates, his assistant campaign manager, convicted. Paul Manafort, his campaign manager, convicted. George Papadopoulos, convicted. Mike Flynn, convicted. Michael Cohen, convicted. Roger Stone, convicted. And this morning, I don't know if you realize this or not, but the post office has its own police department. Yes, it's a crime to tamper with the federal mails. It's also a crime to use the mail for fraudulent purposes. So if you can induce somebody to mail you a check and then you scam them, you've committed a postal crime, a federal crime of it's called, mail fraud. And sure enough, the post office's police department this morning arrested Steve Bannon for running this giant con on Trump supporters. And, and I got to say, I don't increasingly, well, I'll get to that in just a second. Increasingly, my thoughts on, I should just finish this thought. Increasingly, I am convinced that Donald Trump, while, yes, he's running for re-election, on the long shot chance that he can actually win, and he's going to try and scam it, and he's going to try and run the same scam that George W. Bush did in 2000, when it was fairly obvious that Al Gore had won the election, and so, Roger Stone went down to Florida and ran this operation with guys from Tom DeLay's office and Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts with the so-called Brooks Brothers riot to say, stop counting the votes. And they got Fox News to promote the idea that, yeah, Bush has won and Al Gore is trying to steal the election away from him. Donald Trump is going to repeat that same game. Mark Carlin writing about that this morning on BuzzFlash. It's a great piece. So increasingly, I'm thinking that what Donald Trump is actually doing, with probably 4/5 of what he's doing with all the emails that I'm getting, and at least half of them, well, at least a third of them now, and on some days 2/3 of them, are actually not from the Trump campaign. They're from super PACs affiliated with the Trump campaign. His biggest super PAC, Trump's biggest super PAC, has raised like $120 million. Well, he gets to keep that money if he loses. So, I mean, this is a giant con job going on, and it's very similar to the con job that Steve Bannon was running, which is, hey, people who support Donald Trump, send us money and we'll build a private wall. And they collected $25 million and put a good chunk of it in their own pockets, which is why is why Steve Bannon's in jail right now. So, I mean, this shouldn't surprise us that Steve Bannon ran a con, that Rick Manafort ran a con, that Rick Gates ran a con, that George Papadopoulos was running a con, that that Donald Trump ran a con. I mean, he started out. His run for president was a con job. It wasn't he didn't go down the golden elevator or escalator to get himself elected president. He did it to try to get NBC to pay him more than Gwen Stefani. He was enraged when he discovered that he wasn't the most highly paid NBC reality star, that she was making $2 million a year more than he was. I mean, Michael Moore outed this in the very beginning of his last movie. So what did Trump do? He assembled around him a group of fellow grifters, Bannon, Manafort, and a bunch of foreign governments, including Russia, and they managed to squeak him into the White House. And since then, this grift has gone into overdrive. They're now giving away public lands to their campaign donors. They're giving huge no-bid contracts to their campaign donors. They're passing out massive tax breaks to their campaign donors. They're even trying to destroy the post office on behalf of their campaign donors. Are you noticing a theme here? Give us money, we'll give you what you want. Unless you're the people, the average people. I mean, if you're a big corporation or a billionaire, you give Trump money, he gives you what you want. There's a story, Judd Legum over at popular.info today as a piece, or yesterday actually, I think it was, has a piece out about how this trucking executive gave Trump's super PAC, again, that's money that's going to end up in Trump's pocket. This trucking executive gave Trump's super PAC millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands or whatever it was, some huge contribution, and in exchange for that, apparently, this trucking company got hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts in the post office from Louis DeJoy. Surprise, surprise. Of course, Louis DeJoy just sold for $600 million his own trucking company that contracts with the post office, although he still owns a piece of it. But the biggest and most dangerous part of the Trump con job is what President Barack Obama called out last night. And I thought the Democratic convention last night was absolutely brilliant. It was extraordinary. And President Barack Obama called out this con job that is the Republican Party, the modern Republican Party, the conservative movement, and Donald Trump. He said, I never expected, this is what Obama said, I never expected that my successor, that would be Trump, would embrace my vision or continue my policies. I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously, that he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did. And the consequences of that failure, President Obama said, are severe. 170,000 Americans dead, millions of jobs gone, while those on the top take more than ever. He said Trump has seen our worst impulses unleashed, our proud reputation around the world badly diminished, and our democratic institutions threatened like never before. I mean, he just laid it right out. And there were some just extraordinary moments from that convention. But he goes on to say the commander-in-chief doesn't use, he's talking about Trump, doesn't use the men and women of our military who are willing to risk everything to protect our nation as political props to deploy against peaceful protesters on our own soil. In other words, he shouldn't. Right? I mean, historically, the commander-in-chief doesn't do this, but this one did. Obama said political opponents aren't un-American just because they disagree with you. A free press isn't the enemy, but the way we hold officials accountable. Our ability to work together to solve big problems like a pandemic depends on fidelity to facts and science and logic, not just on making stuff up. None of this should be controversial. These are American principles, said President Barack Obama, the last president of the United States, who was actually a president of the United States. He says, this administration has shown it will tear our democracy down if that's what it takes to win. The last president of the United States saying that the current president of the United States is running a con and is destroying democracy. This has never happened before in the history of this republic. So here we are. From billionaire-funded right-wing think tanks to billionaire-owned Fox News to billionaire-funded efforts to put billionaire-friendly judges on the federal courts to billionaire-funded groups like ALEC writing the very legislation that gets made into law. This whole conservative movement that Ronald Reagan started in 1980 has been one long con. It's a grift. And now the billionaire grifters have kicked this into overdrive. They're sponsoring sleazy and bizarre conspiracy theories, QAnon. They're questioning the viability of democracy. They're attacking our intelligence service and our post office and our FBI and trying to wrap themselves in the flag.